Giselle Misuda York. In this special edition of Inside Government, BOP students Omari Phillips and Giuliani Roberts interview Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Silveria Jacobs. That interview is ahead on Inside Government. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Inside Government. I'm your host, Giuliani Roberts.
And I'm Omari Phillips.
We are currently students of the BOP program. Today we are here with the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, Minister Silveria Jacobs. Thank you for coming, Minister.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Our first question today is, why did you decide to join politics?
Politics. Well, actually, I didn't choose politics. It sort of chose me. I was always actively busy in the background. And one day I was asked to introduce our leader at a political rally. And in that speech, after that speech, as a single parent, everybody basically attacked me and was like, you need to be up there. And I'm like, no. So that's where it started. I didn't take it on at that time. And a few months after, 2 years after, the leader of the party did approach me to actually join. And after a very short deliberation, thinking that I would be able to make a difference, because at the time I was in education for several years and quite frustrated with some of the things going on there, and hoping that I could make a difference, I joined.
The Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports. How did you feel when you were appointed to that ministry?
Okay, as I said previously, I've been an educator since my 23rd year. I studied abroad to be in education. I always wanted to teach. And I was actually pretty good at it. Have a good affinity with my students. I think I made a pretty good difference with the students that I taught. And then I later became a student care coordinator, and then wanted to have a broader reach. So as a student care coordinator, you're dealing with not just your class, you're dealing with all of the students, and especially those that had, some type of a special need. But I also was a resource for the teachers and for parents, and I felt pretty good doing that. But even before I did that, even as a teacher, the principals would always call on me to do more than what was my job, and I would gladly fill those roles. So I kind of had, I guess, the leadership gene in me all that time. I didn't realize it. I've always been an avid sports person myself. So I'm an athlete, played Little League baseball, volleyball, softball, and still do a little bit with that. And as I was a dancer also. I am a dancer. And so I've been a performing artist, even as I got older, even doing some theatrical musicals together with some of my dancers. Some of the dancers I've taught liturgical dance in the church. So I think I'm well affiliated to all the aspects of education, culture, youth, and sports. I'm totally passionate about those things. So those areas, so I gladly accepted the challenge.
So basically you enjoy being the Minister of Education.
Honestly speaking, the actual work of a minister isn't as glamorous as it may seem before you get into it. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of work. It is a lot more challenging than you anticipate. Your ideas can be executed as quickly as you would like, based on how the organization is, based on budgets and so it's quite frustrating for me at times, but I'm still here.
Okay. Omar, you have any questions you would like to ask?
Actually, yes, a very important question. The official language is Dutch, but in school we are not taught to speak Dutch fluently in some schools. Why is the reason for that?
Okay, I need to correct you on that. The official languages for St. Martin are both Dutch and English. Mm-hmm. And that is why with the whole mother tongue movement, that government, the Netherlands Antilles government, when we were still part of that, chose for mother tongue instruction. And so we allow schools to still do Dutch instruction from elementary, but actually it's not necessary that it should be so. It's actually a provision. Dutch and English are the languages of instruction, and it should be so that you are taught to be fluent in both. That is what it should be. Those are some of the challenges we have, and we are actually addressing those right now in terms of changing the way we are teaching Dutch in the English-speaking schools, because they were using the same program as the Dutch-speaking schools. So they are more now gearing the English-speaking schools to have Dutch as a second language instead of as a main language being taught. And with that fundamental change, we're hoping to see improved success with our students leaving these schools to be more proficient. The way it was before, I was still teaching when it changed. And before I left the teaching, I had some of the first students who got to 6th grade with English from kindergarten coming up. And I was still able to get quite a few children into the Dutch streams of high school. And so I think it's possible, but of course it would depend on the child's motivation. It would depend on the child and the school's push and continuity. Because we had a big problem at a certain moment with Cycle 2 Dutch teachers, which are grades 4 to 6, grades 3 to 6, where that there were not enough Dutch teachers in some of the English schools. So then some students ended up with gaps. But it should be that you end up with a very high level of Dutch, as in Dutch countries. Now we're seeing a lot of the elementary students are learning English, and many more Dutch people speak English than when I went to Holland in 1986. So we definitely have to not see us knowing more languages as a threat. As a matter of fact, the average St. Martin child knows 4 languages. So we should actually focus on becoming proficient in more than just 1 or 2, as that's an asset for global mobility.
Okay. Have the Department of Education ever thought about student body presidents?
Well, the Department of Education doesn't regulate those things. Where that is regulated, we do have parenting platforms. So it's described within the law that schools should have a parenting platform. But schools do, most of the high schools especially, do have student government bodies. As a matter of fact, before I got involved in politics, this is where some of my activism lay. And together with another couple of other friends when we were in our early 30s, we went and visited and did workshops at all the high schools to teach students what student governments were about, help them establish theirs, and for a few years stayed with them. And the goal was then that they would continue to pass it on to their peers. So they would have a diverse group, not only exam students, so that, once they graduated, it would die. So they would have to have representatives from each year within the student government of the schools. And I do believe several schools still have it. So if they've fallen by the wayside, I would challenge you as a student still to fight to get yours back up and running.
Juliani, you can continue.
On Sunday, July 31st, at the Bon Voyage ceremony, 33 students left to further their education in the Netherlands. As Minister of Education, how did that make you feel?
Well, it brought back a lot of memories for me. I also, back in 1986, yes, left with a group of students, a much larger group of students. And at the time, we were under the Netherlands Antilles. The study recipients, the majority of us were under the Netherlands Antilles. So I received a full scholarship from the Netherlands Antilles at the time, so not from the St. Martin government. There was a distinction then between island government and Lands government. And my scholarship was via them. But we all traveled together, and then there was we met with the Curacao students and the Aruba students, and all of us met in the Netherlands at the same time. And there was a huge hotel reception. So from the get-go, you were out of your comfort zone. I remember the tears. I remember the emotions, the whole newness of everything. I remember not wanting to leave. But I saw a difference. I know that the preparations that we're making now with study financing, you have to do a lot more preparation before you leave. And so we're feeling now that our students are even better prepared to leave and take these big steps on their own. They do have guidance counselors still, but everything in terms of their housing, school, is regulated prior to them leaving. So it's with a sense of pride that I see a growth in our preparation for the students. Some sadness that the groups are getting smaller, but it's understandable seeing that more and more students, and we are also as a government promoting more studying in the region. The Dutch option still remains a good and viable option for most students because they're able to get the dual funding for study financing, even if they're not able to get St. Martin study financing, which is limited. Every Dutch citizen within the kingdom has access to that. It would be even better if you had access to that and could study where you wanted. So that's one of the goals that we continue to have discussions with the Ministry of OCWA in the Netherlands to see if we can get the possibilities for the Dutch Caribbean students to be able to study in areas where they can make use of the funding, but not necessarily be in the Netherlands.
Yeah. On that day, during your speech, you said that was your first time signing many decrees for arts and sports. Do you
Yes.
think that trend will continue?
Well, that is one of the goals. It wasn't many, but it was a couple. It's not yet on our priority list, and so I can only deviate so much from the priority list, else I'm setting a trend which we can't necessarily afford. But I believe having or supporting artists and athletes is very, very important. Actually, 2 of our athletes who were in regular colleges are transferring to schools that have recruited them because of sports. So they did do a year or 2 years of the regular, and so they have to request now a change of study, a change of school, which happens regularly anyway. So I'm quite proud that, we'll be able to have at least 2 athletes, at schools, not only because of their academic prowess, but also because of their athletic ability. Unfortunately, there has been some cases where students have applied and have not been able to get, especially in the art world, because they're maybe not necessarily an academic school, because all study financing right now is granted based on academics. So the study financing ordinance is in a process. It would include talent scholarships as well. So that would then not be like a deviation, but it's taking a lot longer. As I said before, it's so frustrating, the press comes at you, the people come at you like, why isn't this done and why isn't that done? But a lot of things take much, much, much longer than one would expect. The ordinance has been prepared. It was prepared and vetted by the legal affairs. Then it went back for changes, and then it came back 6 to 7 different times. And you could just count that as 6 to 7 different years going back and forth. And, finally, with the last changes that were requested, we just said, you know what, it's going to go on and we'll deal with the changes as we go along, because it has to be finally debated and come to a decision. So hopefully we can get it through to Parliament this year, and if not this year, early next year, so that with at least the next, hopefully, students that I'm not deviating from a priority list, or at least maybe by then the priority list would also include sports and arts type careers.
Omari?
What is the significance of the priority list?
Yes, because we have limited funds for our study financing, we don't have an unlimited budget. If you apply for DUO, you could apply for whatever you want. As long as you get into the school, you get the funding. Because we have a limited amount, we have to look at, as a small island, what do we need? So there's an assessment done with all the stakeholders to see what jobs are needed. So we have seen some changes with more vocational type studies coming on to play. Pilot came on and some others that weren't there before. More IT jobs have come on the list. And so it continues to evolve. But we've had some glitches in the past in the sense of the study that we commissioned didn't really bring about a big change in what we had expected and anticipated. So still, when I get an application and the committee can only, that's another thing that I need to probably explain. A lot of people think that the division study financing makes the decisions as to who gets and who doesn't get. There are policies in place as to, based on, again, on amount of funds available, and you have to be accepted at your school. You have to have a certain grade point average from your high school, or if you did a GED, it needs to be at a certain level. Your parents' tax forms have to be in place, etc., etc., etc. So there's a whole, list of prerequisites to apply, to even just fill out the form and bring it in. So it's not to a point where everybody has a right. When we get endless money in a bucket, we can do that. But until then, we have a limit. So we have set criteria, or criteria has been set. I met the criteria there. And a lot of people maybe don't agree with the criteria. So then, of course, as students or parents, I would then suggest to you to bring this forth either to myself or to Parliament to be debated in terms of changing things. But as I said before, the study financing ordinance is going through the route. So with the changes that come there, they will be debated in Parliament anyway, and then the general public can also voice their opinions. But it is it's a very difficult decision. There were years, I could remember once when I was minister, that we had more qualified persons that had applied than the budget. So we actually had to say that the student qualifies, but due to budgetary constraints, the study financing cannot be granted. That's a very hard letter for me to sign. I get a committee. There's a committee that takes the decisions based on the criteria. They send it up to me with a list with the student's information. Everything has been submitted. The student wants to study this or that at this and that college, and it is either a positive or a negative advice from the committee, or it's pending. It can be pending if the student has not yet, brought in all the information or the exams haven't passed as yet. So it's depending on whether the student passes their final exams. So it would be pending. So then I either approve according to the committee's recommendation, positive, then I would say positive also, or granted, and then sign and put a date. Or if they gave a negative advice and I still think that the student should be given an opportunity, then I have to grant, but then I have to elucidate why, because I'm going against the committee, which is going according to policy. So the minister still has a final say, but even when I deviate from the advice of the committee, I have to explain why.
If a school security guard is behaving inappropriately to the students, is that something that can be addressed to the school? And if the school doesn't do anything about it, can we inform the ministry?
I am so happy you asked that question, not specifically that one, but in terms of procedures. A lot of people I have found, because of easy access to social media, feel that the best way to solve a problem is to just blast it out there. More than likely, it creates a sensation and you become an overnight hit. If that's your goal, then great. But if you're really trying to resolve a problem, there's a chain of command that you should follow. Any problem that a student encounters in school should first be addressed at the school. So with the school counselors, the school management, and go up. After the school counselors and school management, you have a school board. It is only after it has surpassed the school board is when the ministry can get involved, not necessarily the minister. Why? Because we have a Department of Education and we have the Division of Inspection. The inspectorate is mandated by me to go to the schools to make sure the quality of education is upkept, to make sure compulsory education is upheld, as well as other laws as it pertains to education. The Department of Education is the ones that set the parameters under which education can be given. So, and the funding. So a school board submits, we have X amount of students and we fund based on the number of students, usually X amount of students. And so therefore I will require X amount of teachers for this subject, that subject, that subject. And they're allowed to, based on our schema, to have, director, assistant director, depending on the amount of students. So the Department of Education works as a regulatory body as well as the inspection. So usually complaints to the minister would be redirected to them for advice. And then as a minister, if it is within my authority, then I can take a decision. But something as simple as a security guard and issues with a school, the school board has all authority and is the authority to deal with that.
Okay.
Seeing that this has been happening a lot in St. Martin these past days or months or weeks, how does the ministry protect the youth from child predators or pedophiles?
Wow, that's a very heavy question. The youth department actually is the one that deals with the protection of the youth. So they're the one that set policy, et cetera, et cetera. So we are busy actually working together with the Ministry of VSI and Justice on a protocol for reporting abuse. As it stands now, that falls under justice. So if any child is being abused physically, mentally, sexually, or any other type of way, they must report it. Anybody who knows of it, an adult, must report it. Because if after the fact it is found that an adult was aware and didn't report it, they're also held liable. So the student, of course, should be the first to report it. If the student doesn't, I would say as a student, report it directly to the counselors in the school and to your parents. Never be afraid. Break the silence. That's part of what we're doing now, working on a protocol and also a campaign to make more young people aware of your rights. The rights of the child is also highly promoted from the youth department, which is the same one that brought you guys into the BOP program. And, it's multifaceted. But because we have to rely on other ministries, it's not yet completed. When you deal with different ministries, meetings after meetings and changes and whatnot have to be done, especially where legislation is concerned. So we're really trying to get that policy finalized. It's part of our governing program. It's been in the process already for maybe 2 years. So we're really hoping that we could get it out, before the end of 2018 for sure, so that all are aware of what their rights are and what steps they need to take. But right now it's already regulated in the law in the sense of youth are protected. I mean, we've heard of cases where people have been prosecuted, but a lot of times it goes unreported. That's the biggest threat, I believe, to our youth, that you don't speak up. So I really would like to encourage you to encourage your peers. A lot of times students feel people won't believe them or the perpetrator has something over them. Maybe they accepted a gift from them, or maybe they have to grade them in school, or maybe whatever the case may be, but there's a fear. And as long as you're telling the truth, because people can also lie about these things and then cause a whole uproar in someone's life. This is not something to play with, because abuse is serious. So really only report it if it's really that. We also do awareness programs as government within the schools from elementary in terms of this is your body, what's allowed, what's not allowed, etc. But I think a lot of our children are wiser than us in terms of when we go into the schools. But at least knowing definitions of what is correct, what is incorrect. And parents also should make sure they have that information, that their children know it even before they leave their homes. So report it. Report it to the police. Report it to Voogdijraad. The Voogdijraad falls, what is it called in English? Child Protection, Court of Guardianship, falls under the Ministry of Justice. And they have an office over at the Vineyard Building still. And that's where the protection of children falls. So even if your parents don't believe you, as a child, you can report there. And they are obligated to follow up and report it to the police and so forth and so on.
In the news lately, when I watch the news, I see that many people are finding treasure underwater. So what is
There's a whole discussion, yes.
What is government policy for found treasures in our water?
Yes, I did express a whole press release on that because there had been some allegations of what's going on and what's not going on. In cases like this, if someone has found something in the water, they have to report it. You're not allowed to remove anything, whether land or water, as a matter of fact. But because something that's on land, most of the things that have been on land have been found already, I would assume. It doesn't occur as much and definitely hasn't occurred in my time. And this is also the first time that, we're dealing with cases as such. So if something is found within our waters, there are laws that there's a maritime law as well as the protection of cultural monuments. I don't remember the exact name of it at this point because we're really just dealing with it right now. There's a law, but a lot of the policies aren't in place to really guide the process. But international laws also exist, which we fall under as well. So what I explained in that press release was that, you're not allowed to remove it. There is on the books that if something is found in St. Martin territorial waters, and it is ascertained to be a quote-unquote treasure as such, it is then the person finding it has a 50% claim that they can make. How that is worked out hasn't been finalized as yet either. And so that's why, hearing all the shoo-shoo, as you would say, all over Facebook and whatnot, without people having the facts, it really, grown people making statements of which they don't know the facts really, really annoys me. Mm-hmm. If children do that, I can be very, very forgiving. That's a teacher in me because you're growing. And I do believe adults, we all are growing, because prior to this case happening, I didn't have all that information either. So research had to be done, and the culture department had to bring me up to speed. The archaeologists brought me up to speed, and we don't have a lot of the amenities here to be able to even store certain treasures. So sometimes treasure is found and it has to stay at the bottom of the sea, because if you remove it, it will be destroyed, or whatever the case may be. So first of all, you have to prove that you found something, and then you would request permission from the minister in this case, because we have not established what they call in Dutch a meldpunt, a reporting contact agency for that. So until there's one, they have to report to me, and then request a waiver to be able to remove it. Yeah. And I have to then get advice from the Monument Council and archaeologists and all of that before a decision can be taken as to whether the treasure can be removed or not. So it's a pretty long process, but it's usually kept pretty quiet in order for us to make sure that it remains safe.
Omari, anything before we finish off?
One last important question. When it comes to the unemployment of our youth, what are the options for teenagers with talents and career fields that St. Martin just don't have much to offer on?
What are our options? I think around the globe, that's a problem in a sense of making sure there are jobs for young people. Basically, when you hear people talk nowadays, we are preparing you for a future that doesn't exist, that is changing almost by the second. So especially being a small island and just becoming a country a few years ago, we do not have everything readily available. There's somebody who might have a dream to be an astronaut. Mm-hmm. We don't have a space program. But of course, if you're that brilliant, you should get an opportunity to achieve your dreams. You just wouldn't be doing it in St. Martin, but you will be representing St. Martin wherever you go. So in certain job fields, though you don't have the opportunity to exploit it right here on the island, you still get opportunity to study it. You still get opportunity even via study financing, especially, I forgot to mention that if you are considered brilliant, then you can study anything you want.
Minister, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to answer our questions.
It's been my pleasure, and much success to you all in your futures.
This is Inside Government. I'm Omari Phillips.
And I'm Juliani Roberts. Thank you for watching.